in a temperature-controlled archive room in Maryland. There are shelves filled with boxes that were never intended for public attention. Inside them are typed reports, handwritten observations, faded photographs, and fragments of conversations recorded decades ago. Most of the pages appear ordinary at first. Glance clinical language, official formatting, signatures at the bottom. But the subjects being described are not equipment or procedures. They are people. Some volunteered without fully understanding what they were entering. Others never consented at all. Many believed they were participating in routine medical treatment, psychological studies, or harmless observation. Instead, they became part of experiments that remained hidden for years, sometimes decades, before fragments of the truth surfaced through investigations, lawsuits, declassified files, or accidental discovery. This is not speculation. These experiments happen, and perhaps the most unsettling part is not that they occurred, but how ordinary the systems around them appeared while they were happening. The official explanation is usually the same: national security, scientific progress, medical advancement. During periods of war, political tension, or rapid technological development, governments and institutions often expanded. Research programs with minimal oversight. Ethical boundaries became flexible under pressure. Experiments that would later be condemned were justified at the time as necessary, temporary, or strategically important. History provides many examples that continued for decades after treatment became available, with participants deliberately left untreated so researchers could observe the progression of disease. The men involved were never fully informed about the nature of the study. Officially, it was framed as medical research. In practice, it became something far darker. There was also a covert CIA program involving psychological experimentation, behavior manipulation, and the administration of psychoactive substances, often without informed consent. Some records were destroyed before investigations began, leaving large portions of the program incomplete even today. The surviving documents are fragmented, but what remains is enough to reveal the scale of what was attempted. Not science fiction, not rumors, official memorandums, budgets, research proposals, and testimony. And beyond these well-known cases, there were radiation experiments conducted on hospital patients, prisoners, military personnel, and civilians throughout the mid-20th century. In several instances, individuals were exposed to dangerous substances without understanding the risks involved. The reasoning was often framed in technical language: data collection, exposure thresholds, long-term observation. The language itself is striking when read now. Calm, administrative, almost detached from the human consequences being described. And perhaps that is what makes these documents feel so unsettling. Not anger, not panic, just procedure. Because the experiments rarely appeared monstrous from within the systems conducting them. They were divided into departments, approvals, research goals, funding requests. Each stage looked bureaucratic, organized, rational, which creates a difficult realization. Large-scale ethical failures do not always emerge from chaos. Sometimes they emerge from structure. There is also the question of secrecy. Many of these programs remained hidden, not because they were impossible to discover, but because the information was participants knew little, researchers knew only parts. Records remained classified or buried inside larger institutions where oversight was limited, and when information finally surfaced, it often appeared incomplete. Missing files, destroyed archives, contradictory testimony. This does not necessarily imply a deliberate effort to hide everything forever. Sometimes records disappear because institutions protect themselves. Sometimes because programs end abruptly. Sometimes because no one expects future scrutiny. But the result is the same. Fragments remain where complete histories once existed. There were also psychological experiments that explored isolation, obedience, sleep deprivation, and sensory manipulation. Some took place in universities, others within military contexts or intelligence research. The official goals varied: understanding human behavior, improving interrogation techniques, studying stress responses. Many researchers believed they were contributing to important knowledge, and in some cases, the findings influenced later psychology, medicine, and behavioral science in legitimate ways. but the methods often cross boundaries that later generations found deeply disturbing, because the line between observation and harm can shift gradually inside controlled environments, especially when subjects are reduced to data. There is an important distinction here. Not all historical experimentation was malicious. Modern medicine exists partly because research advanced through trial, observation, and difficult ethical lessons. Vaccines, surgical techniques, and treatments that save millions of lives emerged through scientific experimentation. But the darker cases reveal something else. What happens when oversight disappears faster than ambition? Because knowledge itself creates pressure. Once institutions believe something can be discovered, whether psychological control, biological resilience, or technological advantage, the incentive to continue often becomes stronger than the caution to stop. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout history, not only in governments, but in corporations, military programs, universities, and research institutions across different countries. And this is what makes the subject feel larger than individual scandals. The experiments are different, but the structure surrounding them is often similar. Urgency, secrecy, authority, a belief that the objective justifies the method. There is also the uncomfortable reality that many of these programs were not hidden particularly well while they were active. People raised concerns. Journalists investigated. Participants questioned what was happening. But institutions carry momentum, especially large ones. And momentum can normalize actions that appear shocking only in retrospect. This creates another unsettling possibility. Not that history is filled with hidden conspiracies, but that systems are capable of drifting further than the individuals inside them fully recognized in the moment. Because most people involved in these programs were not cartoon villains. Many believed they were serving science, medicine, or national interests. Some later expressed regret, others defended their actions for the rest of their lives. The danger was not always cruelty. Sometimes it was distance. Distance between decision makers and subjects, between research goals and human consequences, between what was recorded on paper and what was experienced in reality. And perhaps that is why these stories continue to disturb people decades later, not because they feel impossible, but because they feel possible enough to happen again under the right conditions. The archives remain incomplete. Some files were destroyed intentionally, others lost through time, bureaucracy, or neglect. Entire programs are known only through scattered references and surviving documents, which naturally raises a difficult question. If some experiments became known only because fragments survived, how many others disappeared completely? There may be no answer to that, and perhaps there does not need to be, because the documented cases already reveal enough to understand that modern systems, scientific, political, military, are capable of crossing ethical boundaries gradually, quietly, and often with institutional confidence rather than visible malice. The people conducting the experiments often believed history would justify them. Sometimes history partially did. Sometimes it condemned them completely. But in every case, the documents remain strangely similar. Clinical language, careful formatting, detached observations, as though the structure of bureaucracy itself creates a kind of emotional distance between action and consequence. And perhaps that is the most unsettling detail of all. Not the secrecy, not the experiments themselves, but the realization that some of the darkest decisions in modern history were recorded calmly, professionally, and systematically, then placed inside ordinary filing cabinets, where they remained for years before anyone looked closely enough to ask what had really happened.